This week, one of the most highly anticipated film of the year hit screens in Korea, and that is Interstellar, which is an original sci-fi film with a big-name director and an ambitious story. The movie is already the hottest ticket in town, and our film critic, Pierce Conran, joins us to tell us about it. Welcome to the studio, Pierce.
Good to be back.
So, give us the backgrounds of the movie. What is it all about, and who's starring in the movie?
Well, actually, the big thing about Interstellar, or the big name behind it, rather than an actor, in this case, it would have to be the director. It's Christopher Nolan, who made the Batman films. He also made Inception, Prestige, Insomnia, Memento. I mean, he's a star director, and there's very few of those these days. So it's strange to have a film that's so big and actually have the biggest name in the film is actually the director. Not to mention, it's an original film. We don't see a lot of those. And the last time there was a big original sci-fi like this, besides last year's Gravity, there was also Inception, also a Christopher Nolan film. But looking at the cast, we do have Matthew McConaughey in the lead role, and he's in the midst of this kind of much-publicized reconnaissance. And for people that don't know what that means, this is an actor who, for a long time, was kind of derided for starring in a lot of kind of cheesy rom-coms, and kind of he's famous for kind of more like playing bongos in his big mansion in Beverly Hills than anything else. And then in the last few years, he's completely reinvented himself, starring in films like Mud, and then the show True Detective, and now Interstellar. And so he's getting a lot of kind of kudos for his acting, not to mention an Oscar for Dallas Buyers Club last year. We also got Anne Hathaway and Jessica Chastain, and this is, it's a big space adventure, big space opera, and this is the kind of thing that people get pretty excited to see in the cinema.
So speaking of space films, we had another big one last year, and that was Gravity, right? How are they different, the two movies?
Well, the time is interesting because we have two very big kind of sci-fi original films at the same time of the year that are kind of also angled for an Oscar run. So there's a lot of similarities already. But whereas Gravity is a more self-contained film that it exists very much in the realm of knowledge that we already know, the kind of space exploration that we've already done. Interstellar is a much bigger film, and it deals with, it has a very big kind of emotional palette, more characters, and also it's kind of explores things more kind of complicated and interesting scientific ideas that kind of relate to space travel that we haven't been able to do yet. So it's a very ambitious and kind of exciting film, but both of them are kind of technical marvels.
Wow. But I also heard that the movie is running for a very long time. Is Nolan biting off more than he can chew?
Well, it's not the first time that Nolan's presented us with a very long film. His films typically clock well over 2 hours, and this one, yeah, it's 3 hours, so it's his longest. But it hasn't been a problem with his previous films, and in my opinion at least, it's certainly not a problem with this one. The 3 hours kind of completely fly by. And, it's a film that has so much scale and ambition, and yet it's kind of it's anchored by this kind of incredible emotional ballast. So it works kind of on all counts, and there's a lot of there aren't that many characters actually, more than Gravity, where there's only 2. But we have it's both a necessary decision because it gives us time to kind of learn about these characters and kind of go on this journey with them and really kind of feel it. But it's also kind of a wise decision because it doesn't overwhelm all the many elements that are in the film besides the characters.
So do you think it's going to be a big hit here in Korea and across the world? It's actually screening at the same time in Korea and across the world. Right?
Yeah, it's a global release. I think it's coming out in China next week, but besides that, it's pretty much released in every single country. I mean, Nolan's films are huge. His last 3 films alone have made almost $3 billion, which is just incredible.
Wow.
And I mean, there's no reason to expect that this film won't be a big hit. We've already talked about Gravity. That was also a huge hit at the same time last year. There's a lot of buzz, and people just are really excited. Will it go the distance? It's an original film. It's always risky. But at the same time, we've had so many comic book films and so many other franchise movies throughout summer, and all these tentpoles are always, they're based on like a series of books or whatever, and we don't get a lot of original films. When we do, people do get excited. The same happened with Gravity, same happened with Inception a few years ago. And I think we're going to see the same right now with this. Already the early box office grosses are pretty strong. The reservations in Korea are huge, and I think particularly the emotional core of the film. To be honest, Nolan's films have been criticized in the past for not being very, very emotional, which is perhaps true, but that's because he wasn't intending to do something like that. With this film, he is, and for me, that really works really, really well. And I think Korean audiences will respond to that particularly well, so I think it's going to be a huge hit here.
What about the critiques? How are they reacting? I mean, are they also very excited?
Well, I think I'm certainly on the high end of the critical reception. I really love it. But at the same time, the film did screen for critics quite a while ago. And when a studio shows a film very early, that's a huge sign of confidence. And the reviews have been generally quite strong. There have been some raves. Most people like it, but some have criticized it. There has been a vocal community of people who don't like it. Some people think that Nolan is kind of overreaching a little bit, and that there's this enormous ambition, and perhaps the craft of the story doesn't kind of meet up with that. And I personally accept some of the criticisms of the film, but as a huge kind of ambitious kind of just magnificent thing to kind of see on the film on the big screen, I think it's a worthwhile experience.
And these days it's very rare to see an original film, as you just mentioned, in the movie theater. Why do you think that is? Where is that coming from?
Well, it's a big area of discussion, and it's kind of something that I think is a big problem in the industry. But essentially, what we have is that in yesteryear's Hollywood, the power was in the hands of the producers, or at least in the hands of creatively inclined executives. And these days, the way that the financial system has changed, it's more kind of financially minded executives that have the power. And so a franchise movie makes sense because you have characters or a story, you have this premise that is known to audiences, so you're just introducing them to something that they already know about, so there's already knowledge about it. It makes sense. They're safer, but so we're not seeing as many risks these days, and I think that's a bit sad. But an Interstellar, as much as I'm praising it for being kind of an original vision, it's also a Christopher Nolan film, and he's so big that just his name alone kind of brings a lot of kind of box office clout, so it's not that risky.
So for viewers in Korea, I mean audiences in Korea, and for also me and those who haven't seen the movie yet, which kind of format do you best recommend to watch the movie?
Well, there's so many, actually. These days we have so many screening formats.
True.
And there's been a lot of talk about this one because Christopher Nolan himself has kind of urged people to see it, first of all, in IMAX, but also on film. And these days we don't see many films screened on film. Everything we see is on a digital projector, is what we call a DCP. But the thing is that most theaters don't have these analog, film projection canisters anymore. But I would say definitely see it in IMAX. There's a lot of IMAX screens in Korea, and actually I just saw it again last night. Saw it 2 times at the new Super G-Plex, which is at the Lotte Tower. It's the biggest cinema in the world.
Yeah,
it's quite impressive.
All right, I should check out this movie there at the World Tower, Lotte World Tower 2. Thank you for joining us in the studio, Pierce.
My pleasure.